Hello, I'm Helen Good, and this is the Elizabethan Star Chamber. And I'm here again with some of the wonderful and generous readers from the Beyond Shakespeare Company who have kindly agreed to read another case for us. And today it's from Ipswich in Suffolk. We also have the benefit today of a local historian who I hope to convert into an advocate for the Star Chamber project by publicising the 110 cases so far identified as arising in Suffolk, and also to give us some help today in identifying what is actually going on in this case. It's a very well documented case. Alan has asked me how many documents there actually are, and I had to use the technical term, a wodge. I think that there is a good ½ inch, maybe more. We're reading a small part, a set of answers called depositions. There will be a lot of repetition, but nowhere near as much as I have cut. And I've rearranged the answers to make the narrative unfold in a nicely dramatic way. So here it is, the Bailifs and Commonalty of Ipswich and Withypoll, or Wythipoll, you can take your choice. And it's from 1568.
Really one.
Now, our readers are here and reading Robert Osborne, John Clark, and Henry Crampton. We have
Alan Scott from the other side of Suffolk.
And reading Giles Steadman, Alexander Reason, and John Ketteridge.
Rachael, actor on the East Coast. I might not have right, but I have reason.
Yes, that East Coast would be the East Coast of the United States of America, not anywhere near Ipswich. Reading Thomas Kane, Thomas Bailey, and Thomas Trenchfield.
Hello, my name is Lynn Freitas, and I am on the other coast of the United States of America.
Reading Robert Potton, Martin Topcliffe, William Ward, William Crisp, and John Hatch.
My name is Aliki Chapple, and accent notwithstanding, I am in the northwest of England.
Reading Geoffrey Corch, John Clark, John Hewling, and Richard Stern.
Kyle DiRoberto. I'm an early modern scholar and academic in Tucson, Arizona.
And reading John Gardner, Richard Tross, and Edmund Barker.
Hi, I'm Eric, and I'm a shambles. I mean, I'm a shambles every day, but even more so than usual.
And reading, finally, Thomas Cage, Thomas Martin, Richard Bride, John Tamer, John May, Robert Wilson, and Robert Wilbur, we have
Liza Graham. I am Legion. I contain multitudes.
All right, starting then, Ipswich and Withypoll. Do we have any views on whether it's Withypoll or Wythipoll? It's spelt both ways.
It's pronounced Withypoll Street these days, but it doesn't mean that's how it was in those days.
Withypoll,
yeah.
Withypoll. Right, everybody, it's Withypoll. Thank you. You have proved your worth and may now go home.
Lovely. I am home. Hang on.
Fair enough. All right, here we go. Depositions taken the 14th of March in the 10th year of the reign of our sovereign lady Elizabeth, by the grace of God, Queen of England, France, and Ireland, defender of the faith, etc. Before Sir Thomas Cornwallis, Knight, John Blenner Hesset, and Robert Gurdon, Esquires, on the part and behalf of the bailiffs, burgesses, and commonalty of the town of Ipswich, plaintiff, against Edmund Withypoll, Esquire, defendant.
John Gardner, one of the portmen of the town of Ipswich, of the age of 52 years. I well know the place where the fair called Holyrood Fair has been usually kept, which is known commonly by the name of St. Margaret's Green for merchandises, and the place called the Lute for cattle and horses and ropes. and in the lane between the Green and Lute, for sale of cheese and butter. And all those places are within the precincts, bounds, and liberties of the town of Ipswich.
Robert Potton of Ipswich, shearman of the age of 80 years. I say what John Gardner said.
Richard Bride of Ipswich, gentleman, one of the aldermen of the town, of the age of 80 years and more. I know well that the place where the fair called Holyrood Fair is within the precincts, bounds, and liberties of the town of Ipswich.
The county of Suffolk, husbandman of the age of 74 years. I know well the place where the fair is kept, as John Gardner hath said, and I know that it is within the precincts of the town of Ipswich.
Thomas Cage of Ipswich, tailor, of the age of 34 years. I know the place where the fair hath been usually kept, and I have gone with the officers and headmen of the town of Ipswich when they have walked the bounds and precincts of the town, and the places where the fair has been usually kept was then declared and taken to be within the liberty and precinct of the town.
Thomas Kane, in the county of Suffolk, collar maker of the age of 44 years. I do know, and for the space of 20 years past I have well known, the place where the fair hath usually been kept, and that the same place is within the precinct and liberty of the town of Ipswich.
Robert Osborne of St. Lawrence Parish in Ipswich, aged 80. I well know the place where the fair is kept, and I know it to be within the liberty of the towns of Ipswich.
Right. Thank you. Now, have we noted some of the ages of these people? Yeah.
2 men in their 80s and one in their 70s. They kind of feel like this is not what they wanted to be doing in their golden years.
Yeah, the 50-something is our spring chicken.
Yeah.
I mean, firstly, everybody assumes that everybody died in their 50s or 60s because there is an average age, but that doesn't take into account that something like, I don't know how many, but maybe 3 in 5 died before they were 5 years old.
Yeah, you have to adjust for that, and you also have to adjust in middle age or youth for war and childbirth. But if you survived those things, you or didn't undergo some of them, you stood as fair a chance as anyone of seeing your 70th or 80th.
Yeah, and one of the reasons why they trot out the octogenarians is because they can remember how it was done. Mm-hmm. The long memory is valued. I mean, quite sometimes they can't remember a thing, but nevertheless, if you are in your 80s, then you are assumed to be holding the knowledge of the place. And there seems a fair amount of unanimity. Does this place, the Lute, ring any bell with you, David? You're muted.
Yeah, I think that's long gone, but St. Margaret's Green is still there, for instance. So I know where it will be, more or less.
Good, good. So one could actually walk up and down and say, this is where it all happened.
Yes, oh yes, definitely, yes.
Right, okay, forward we go. And we've come to Giles Steadman. Can you continue to introduce yourselves? Because otherwise we're going to get very confused.
As you've written in the text.
As we've written in the text,
right?
If you don't mind.
Giles Steadman of Ipswich, merchant of the age of 45 years. I did hear William Meadow, one of the servants of the Edmund Withypoll, say the day before the last fair that if the bailiff of the town of Ipswich should come into the fair, that his master, meaning Edmund Withypoll, would turn them back again, and that they should not walk the fair as before they had done.
Robert Osborne of St. Lawrence Parish in Ipswich, aged 80. The day before the last Holyrood Fair, I went with my neighbour, John Hewling, where we both met Meadow, a servant to Master Withypoll, which Meadow took occasion to declare unto me and to John Hewling that Master Withypoll had given him a commandment to go to the bailiffs of Ipswich and to give them warning that if they should not the next day during the fair come into their fair with the maces, for if they did, he would withstand them. For, said Meadow, the day that hath been that on the even of this fair, the bailiffs have used to come to the place, I suppose he meant the late Abbey Church, and delivered up their maces before the Trinity in the Abbey, which maces so offered were received and laid upon a cupboard, but by whom they were so taken or laid, he did not say.
John Hewling of Ipswich, cooper of the age of 48 years. I came to one Meadow, servant and bailiff to Master Withipoll, on the fair even, and desired him to appoint me some convenient standing within the fair. And he, Meadow, answered, you are a free man of the town, and my master is little beholden to ye all. And I am presently to go to the bailiffs to say unto them from my master, that if they come tomorrow into the fair with their maces borne before them, that my master will withstand them. And one other of the town standing by said, I think the bailiffs will come as they have done before. To the which Meadow answered, if they so do, my master will withstand them. And he said further that his master had to show that the bailiffs of this town on the fair even did offer up their maces before the Trinity.
Alexander Reason of Ipswich, tailor of the age of 24 years. Richard Hangford, one of the servants of the Edmund Withypoll, came the fair in the morning unto me and prayed me to lend him my sword, for that his master minded that day to walk the fair, and he had not a weapon to wait upon him withal. And I answered that I had none at home, and so he said he must go borrow one in another place.
All right. I hope you are all getting a sense of foreboding. This, you understand, is the 5th of January. It isn't actually, it's the 13th of September. But things are not looking good for the morrow. Liza.
Are these bailiffs in the sense of being empowered to touch people with their staves for debt? Is that why they can't come to the fair with their maces?
No, sorry. This is something that I will briefly explain. Some towns, corporate boroughs, had mayors. Others had an older form, which was bailiffs, and there would be 2 bailiffs every year. They were often compared to Roman consuls. They were the heads of the corporation in their year. This isn't the sort of bailiff that you hire to go and arrest someone for debt. This is a bailiff as in two bailiffs equal 1 mayor. Stratford-on-Avon had bailiffs. Hull had a mayor. But they were the people who wanted to make much of it were very fond of referring to them as the consuls. The other thing in Ipswich, as I gather, is that there were 2 councils. One was of the portmen and was 12. And then there was a more junior council called the 24 at this time. I don't know much about Ipswich. I've only been to the archives there once for looking for stuff on their 2 ships, which they sent to the Cadiz expedition. But they were an old corporate borough and very proud of their liberties. And if I can find my script, we can set off again.
I was wondering.
No, please go ahead, Kyle.
I was wondering the significance of the maces. Are they weapons or ceremonial, or do they have some significance that?
Well, I think they're a bit like the Speaker's mace in the House of Commons. They are the symbol of authority. If you,
Staff of office.
yes, except that they're borne before them by a mace bearer, a sergeant at the mace. Whereas in the House of Commons, if the Speaker is in the chair, the mace is in its position. Once the mace is removed, then the House is no longer in session. Aliki.
So presumably if they were to go without their maces, they'd be fine because they had no power without them. Is that what you're saying?
Well, they weren't going in their official capacity.
Yes.
Yeah. Liza.
So, John Hewling says, I came to one meadows, servant and bailiff to Master Withypoll. What does bailiff mean in that context? Servant and bailiff to someone?
I
Who is
think
Meadow?
he's a
Land agent.
land agent. That's the word. That's the word. Yeah.
Senior domestic.
Yes. Yes. He's manager, estate manager.
Estate manager. Steward.
Yeah.
Okay, so
I think steward. I think bailiff is more outward. Steward is more inward into the household. He'll probably take the rents from the farms and stuff.
okay, so Master Withipoll doesn't want the bailiffs to come into the fair, at least not with their maces.
Yeah.
Presumably, this is so they can't police. We'll find out, I guess, as we go.
Yeah.
Right?
Just remember, jurisdiction is valuable because there are always fees to be taken. And I mean, the business about the Abbey Church, I think, will come up later. Just let me. I've lost my script, and now I found it again. Okay. We are now with John Gardner. Are we go?
John Gardner, one of the portmen of the town of Ipswich at the age of 52 years. I have held the office of one of the bailiffs within the town of Ipswich 4 times within the space of 21 years last past. And by all that time, the bailiff of the town of Ipswich, accompanied with some of the justices of peace, constables, chamberlains, sergeants at the mace, and other officers of the town have yearly, unless they have been by foul weather or other urgent cases letted, have once during each fair, that is to say, in the forenoon of every Holyrood day, resorted and come to the fair with their maces borne before them. And they used to walk through the fair from one end to the other, and have used all that time to examine weights and measures of the craftsmen resorting to the fair, and have also used commonly to punish vagabonds and other malefactors there found without let or interruption of any person.
Thomas Kane of Clayton in the county of Suffolk, collar maker of the age of 44 years. The bailiffs and the other officers have used to resort into the fair, and the sergeants bearing the maces before them. And this I have known and observed for the space of 20 years last past. And I never knew to the contrary, but that the bailiffs and other officers of the town of Ipswich have evermore used to punish malefactors and to see good order kept in the fair without the let of any person until the last fair.
Robert Osborne of St. Lawrence Parish in Ipswich, aged 80. For 33 years last past, or thereabouts, I have yearly known that the bailiffs, accompanied with the justices of peace for the town of Ipswich, constables, sergeants at the mace, and other officers of the same town, have used, as well in the time of the late priors, as servants to resort and come to the fair with their maces borne before them. And I have known the bailiffs of Ipswich yearly to examine within all the fair all weights and measures, and from time to time punish all vagabonds and malefactors as occasion hath been offered.
Richard Bride of Ipswich, gentleman, one of the aldermen of the town, of the age of 80 years and more. The bailiffs of the town of Ipswich, for the time being, accompanied with justices of the peace, constables, chamberlains, sergeant of the mace, and other officers of the town, have used, as well in the late prior's times as civants, to resort and come usually to the fair with their maces borne before them. And I know this of my own knowledge to be true, and can remember for 80 years in my time. And the bailiffs and other officers coming to the fair in all the time of my remembrance have used to walk through the fair, and have examined weights and measures of craftsmen, and have used to punish vagabonds and other malefactors there found without let or interruption of any, until the last year that they were interrupted by Edmund Withypoll, Esquire.
Robert Potton of Ipswich, chairman of the age of 80 years and more. By the space of 80 years and 10, I do well remember that the bailiffs, with some of the justices of the peace, constables, chamberlains, sergeants at the mace, and other officers of the town have yearly used, as well in the time of the late priors, whereof I can remember 4, to resort and come to the fair in the forenoon of every fair day with the mace borne before them, and being so accompanied have passed through the fair from the one end to the other, and have examined as well weights and measures of the craftsmen, and also punished vagabonds and other malefactors there found without let or interruption of any person. And I have seen Prior Ford, Prior Moore, and Prior Wit meet sometime with the bailiffs and officers at St. Margaret's Church Gate, and taking one of the bailiffs by the arm, have passed with them through the fair, and returning, have caused them and their company to dine at the priory.
Thomas Bailey of Ipswich, bricklayer, of the age of 85 years. I say, as Robert Potton hath said, for the space of 41 years last past, but I remember not that the priors have had any time gone with the bailiffs into the fair. And the reason of my knowledge is that about 40 years past, I was a servant to one of the bailiffs for that time, and awaited on him all through the fair.
John Clark of Kesgrave in the county of Suffolk, husbandman of the age of 74 years. For the space of 50 years, by reason of my being at most of the fairs within that time, I know that the bailiffs have used to walk through the fair, and have examined weights and measures, and punished disordered persons. And I have seen the priors sometimes accompany the bailiffs about the fair, and afterwards have had them home to the priory, and caused them to drink.
William Ward of Ipswich, joiner, of the age of 74 years. For the time of 60 years, I have known that the bailiffs and officers, for the time being every Holyrood Fair, have done as before is deposed by John Gardner. And I have seen the bailiffs break unlawful weights and measures at the fair, and delivered them new sealed, and have punished vagabonds and other malefactors.
Thomas Cage of Ipswich, tailor, of the age of 34 years. For the space of 12 years I have known the bailiffs and other officers yearly to come into the fair, having the maces borne before them, and taking with them a brazen yard and weights and measures wherewith to try the weights and measures used in the fair.
Thank you. Right, now then, John Clark of Kesgrave has been to 50 fairs. Where on earth is Kesgrave?
It's a northern suburb of Ipswich in these days.
Yep. Yeah, it's that way.
Yeah. It's about 3 miles.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost sort of urban conurbation these days. It's not far from the big British Telecom Research Centre, sort of in between Ipswich and there.
Okay.
So it's expanded a lot because of that, because obviously people who are working there have chosen to live nearby.
I see. So, and are all the other places that these people are coming from more or less the same? Are they all now within the greater Ipswich?
Well, yeah, sort of just out. So they're not actually within the borough boundary, but they're part of the sort of general area. Yeah, Claydon is that way. That's about 3 miles in that direction. So that's West Ipswich.
So we're talking travel to work area.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, definitely, yes.
Yeah, I think all of the places so far are within 4 or 5 miles of the.
Mm-hmm.
If you described a circle based on St Margaret's Plain or St Margaret's Green,
yeah,
all of the villages so far mentioned would all fall within that.
Mm.
So once a year, a fair chunk of the neighbouring county emptied, and everybody went to the fair.
Certainly sounds like it, yes.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Hang on. I saw a hand. Eric.
Well, they did mention that it was the fair was every forenoon, every Holyrood Fair. So I'm not sure what space of time that is. Is that like once a year? That doesn't make sense.
Well, no, I think the bailiffs went in the forenoon, but I imagine it was an all-day affair. May even have spilled over. Rachael.
What is a Holyrood day?
It's the 14th of September. It is the feast of the exaltation of the Holy Cross. The cross on which Christ was crucified, for those who are not steeped in Christian knowledge.
Yes, but a holiday and therefore a good time to hold a fair.
Yeah.
So Helen, for the benefit of our listeners who may not be as steeped in early modern history as some of us are, do you want to say a word about the importance of enforcing weights and measures and things like that, or do you want to save that?
Well, no. If you think it's important, it was that one of the duties in any corporate borough to make sure that all weights and measures, they would go to the Steelyard in London every now and then and pick up a new set of legal measures, and these would then be used to sort out the local measures. And it was one of the functions of the people.
Yeah, so you don't want a cloth merchant turning up to the fair with a yardstick that doesn't measure an actual yard, so that you don't want him charging people for a yard of cloth and selling them short of a yard. You don't want people selling beverages to sell people short pints, people weighing out fruit or groceries to charge to. Yeah, it's basically a way of preventing cheating. The tailor, for example, remembers them seeing them bring a brazen yard, a yardstick made of brass, or presumably to measure against the yard that the tailor had brought to do his own measuring. And the other thing is that they arrest vagabonds and malefactors. And as a singer myself, and I know a lot of the actors in the room can relate, I'm guessing that some of the people who would have come to perform at the fair might have been classed as vagabonds, itinerant jugglers, singers, all sorts of people in the entertainment profession. Vagabonds, that's us.
Yeah, but it isn't only people in the entertainment industry, as we would now call it. There were also those who. A fair is a great opportunity for picking pockets.
For picking pockets and also begging, right? So, no matter how harmless a beggar is, he's often classed as a person who can be arrested for being a vagabond.
Yes, or selling things without paying for a pitch.
Yes. Oh, and there's probably some sex work going on as well, right?
Well, you might think so. I couldn't possibly comment. Eric,
I was just going to say that I'm assuming that these weights and measures were basically not entirely standardized. They were locally standardized, but not
No.
standardized across the UK. Well, across England. They're not like SI units are today. They're kind of more like tuning forks in the 18th century kind of thing.
that certainly wasn't the way it was regarded. There was in London kept the standard weight and the standard measure. And this was a national standard. And they were very pleased with it. They would not have recognized your reference to casual tuning forks. Any more for any more? Okay. So who's next up? Let me see. It's John Gardner again.
John Gardner, one of the portmen of the town of Ipswich, of the age of 52 years. Geoffrey Gilbert and John Moore, late bailiffs of Ipswich, accompanied with the most part of 12 portmen, and the most part of the 42, the constables, chamberlains, and other officers, went to view the last fair, and they had no other persons appointed by the bailiffs to go with them, to my knowledge, and they proceeded orderly, in peaceable wise, without any weapons, for the examining of weights and measures, to see the Queen's Majesty's peace preserved and vagabonds and other malefactors punished. And they went not throughout the whole fair, for that they were lettered by the defendant Edmund Wythipoll in the lane extending from St. Margaret's Green to the Lute.
Thomas Kane of Claydon in the county of Suffolk, collar maker of the age of 44 years. I know not with what number of persons the bailiffs were accompanied, but they went not without their bounds and liberties, for they came not to the conduit head, where I usually stand with my mace betwixt the horse fair and the other fair.
Giles Steadman of Ipswich, merchant of the age of 45 years. I did see Geoffrey Gilbert and John Moore, late bailiffs of Ipswich, and other officers go and view the last fair. But the certainty of the number of persons in their company I remember not, but I am certain they proceeded in peaceable manner, and to view and see good order kept in the fair, and that neither they or any of them proceeded out of the fair or the liberties and bounds of the town.
Okay, then. We've got a new element, the conduit head, which, heaven knows, must have been part of the freshwater supply, I presume, for the town. And we've also got an idea of the size of this procession. I mean, if we've got most of the 12 and most of the 24, justices of the peace, constables, mace bearers, there was a fair number of them. Liza.
I'm just thinking about, I know this is later than we are now, but Johnson's Bartholomew Fair, where Justice Overdone, Overdue, the Justice of the Peace, comes into the fair in disguise. And now I'm wondering whether he even could have attended the fair in his own person, or in his official capacity, or whether they might have tried to exclude him for essentially being a buzzkill or being bad for business.
Yes, I don't know who had jurisdiction over Bartholomew Fair. Does anybody? Well, something that
It was in London, wasn't it?
Yes, but near Smithfield. But somebody must have had the jurisdiction over it, because nothing happened without someone being responsible
Right. So
for keeping the peace.
The Lord Mayor of London or someone. Yeah.
It might have been. It might very well have been. But jurisdiction is also value. So someone must have been taking the money for the pitches.
Yeah. Oh, and the other thing that occurs to me is part of this is about prestige. The if you were a titled person, the bigger your entourage, the more prestige was signaled by that. So, you know, your bailiff of the town, and you want to get as many people in your train as possible because it looks good. It's showing off. It's a power trip.
Yes, and it establishes your authority.
Yeah, there you go.
All right, and we're back. We're still with Giles Steadman.
Giles Steadman of Ipswich, merchant of the age of 45 years. I did see Edmund Wythipoll at the last fair with certain persons being his servants, to number of 8 persons, as I remember it, or more, assemble themselves together to the intent to inhibit the bailiff and other officers of the town of Ipswich in proceeding to walk and view the fair, and that some of those persons were arrayed with swords and daggers. And I never saw either Edmund Withypoll or any of his servants, other than his bailiff, for the time being, walk or meddle with the fair before that time.
Geoffrey Catch of Ipswich, baker of the age of 56 years. I did see Edmund Withypoll at the last fair with divers and sundry of his servants. The certain number I know not, assemble themselves together to the intent to let or to interrupt the bailiffs and other officers of the town in proceeding to walk and view the fair. And some were arrayed and weaponed with daggers, and one named Waymer had a bill on his shoulder, and I too never before saw Edmund Withypoll walk or meddle with the fair.
Martin Topcliffe of Ipswich, clothier, of the age 52 years. I did see Edmund Withipoll at the last fair with divers of his servants, to the number of 7 or 8 persons, assemble themselves together to the intent to let or interrupt the bailiffs and other officers of the town in proceeding to walk and view the fair. And some were arrayed with daggers, and one with a sword, and I never saw Edmund Withipoll or any of his servants before that wearing any weapon at the fair.
Thomas Martin of Debenham Inn in the county of Suffolk, butcher of the age of 36 years. I saw Edmund Withipoll in the fair with divers of his servants, and one of his servants was then and there bearing a brush hook with a new helve, one other a halberd, and a third a long staff, following their said master in the fair. But what has been used before that time I know not.
John Gardner, one of the portmen of the town of Ipswich, of the age of 52 years. On the last fair day, I saw Edmund Withipoll come into the fair, and had waiting upon him either 6 or 7 in one livery, whose names I know not, more than the name of one Meadow, who followed him also. But whether by his appointment or I know not, and his intent in so coming, I gather by the sequel, which was to withstand the bailiffs and other officers' intents and intended purposes. I do not remember that any of the defendant's servants had any weapon more than one of them, who had a sword and a dagger, but I saw another, whom I judged to be one Warner, follow after the defendant with a brush bill. But whether by his appointment or no, I know not, and I never saw the defendant, to my knowledge, at any fair there before this last fair.
Thomas Kane of Claydon in the county of Suffolk, collar maker of the age of 44 years. I did see Edmund Withipoll on the last fair day, let the bailiff to come up from the one part of the fair into the horse fair, as they were wont to do. And I heard Edmund say to them, "Stay, ye shall come no further."
Geoffrey Catch of Ipswich, baker of the age of 56 years. Edmund Withipoll did encounter and come upon the bailiffs and officers walking the fair and the Queen's Highway, leading from one part of the fair to another, and then and there did stop and let the said bailiffs and officers to proceed or go any further in the last fair by the highway. And then and there use these words or the like in effect, stay yourselves, master bailiffs, and proceed no further. If ye do, I will try on this ground, then stamping there upon the ground.
John May of Martlesham in the county of Suffolk, husbandman, of the age of 50 years. Being at the fair, I saw Master Edmund Wythipoll come forth of his back gate by the pond with 6 or 7 of his men into the fair, having no other weapons but daggers, saving one had a sword, whose name I know not. But for what intent he so came, I know not. But Edmund went forth towards the bailiffs, and I and divers others were following him a pretty way off. And I heard Edmund ask the bailiffs whether they were walking their rogation, and said they ought not to come there within the liberty, for the fair was his. The bailiffs answered they did no otherwise than they had done before that time, and required him to suffer them quietly to pass, and required him in the Queen's Majesty's name to keep the peace, and further gently desired him to let them pass as they had done heretofore. Whereupon Master Withypoll required them to, in the Queen's Majesty's name, no further to pass, said he was a justice of the peace. And the bailiffs said also that they were justices of the peace. And with that, this deponent saw Edmund Withypoll step towards one of the said sergeants, but what he did to him he could not well see for the throng. John Tamer of Rushmere in the county of Suffolk, husbandman of the age of 60 years. Being upon occasion of my business at the last fair, I saw the defendant Edmund Withypoll come out of his back gate with 6 of his men after him, one having a sword, toward the bailiffs, being then in the way near the conduit, and said unto them, Master bailiffs, you come here in your perambulation within my liberties where you ought not to do, and I charge you in the Queen's name that you go no further. The bailiffs said, We have gone this way 20 years and more, and we will continue it unless you can show us good matter why we should not. And the defendant stretched out his hand towards the sergeant to take hold of his mace. But what was there said or done further for the multitude of people, I cannot say, being a good way off.
William Crisp of Charlesfield in the county of Suffolk, husbandman of the age of 38 years, being at Ipswich at Holyrood Fair last for some occasions, I saw Edmund Withipoll with 6 or 7 of his men awaiting of him, one of them having a sword, and coming from his back gate nigh the pond towards the bailiffs, being then in the lane. He put off his cap, and said to them in this wise, Master bailiffs, I charge you in the Queen's name that you go no further, for you come within my privileges, and I have good matter to show for it. And then the bailiffs answered, Sir, if you have any such privileges, we pray you show them, and if you show us good matter, we will stay and go no further. Whereupon he said he would show them in a place where he thought it good, not there. And then the bailiffs required him to let them go, and if they did him any wrong, he might reform it by order of law. And with that, he stepped to his sergeant and took hold of the mace and swore with a great oath, If you would need go, then this, meaning the mace, shall not go. And further I cannot say.
John Gardner, one of the portmen of the town of Ipswich of the age of 52 years. Edmund Wythipoll, accompanied as aforesaid, came toward the bailiffs, then being in the fair, in the Queen's highway that leadeth from St. Margaret's Green towards Westerfield, going towards the Lute. And whereupon the defendant was within 4 yards of the bailiffs, the defendant used these words, or the like, Master bailiff, leave off your progress and vain procession, for you do wrong to come upon my ground. To whom John Moore, then one of the bailiffs, answered and said, No, Master Withypoll, we are in the Queen's highway, and I command you in the Queen's Majesty's name that you keep the peace. And if the town do you any wrong, the law is open for you and for us to try it orderly. And Edmund Withypoll, in great heat, stamping his feet upon the ground, swore a great oath that he would try it with them on that ground, and went forthwith towards one of the sergeants, and laid his hand on the mace, to have taken it from him, saying, I will have this. And with that I cried to the sergeant, Hold fast.
Giles Steadman of Ipswich, merchant of the age of 45 years. Edmund Withypoll did encounter and come upon the bailiffs and officers walking in the fair in the Queen's Highway, leading from one part of the fair to another, and then and there did stop and let the bailiffs to proceed or go any further. By the said highway, with these words, or to the like in effect, Master bailiffs, leave off your procession. Ye shall go no further this way. If ye come any further, I will turn ye back again. And if I be not so able as you are, I will do the utmost of my power. And here will I try it upon this ground, stamping with his foot, and that shall ye well know. And therewith made assault upon the bailiffs. He did violently snatch at and take hold of the mace, then being in the hands of Richard Trossey, one of the sergeants of the mace, who was then bearing the mace before the bailiffs. And Edmund Withypoll did strike with Trossey to have the mace out of his hands, saying, This will I have to begin withal.
Robert Osborne of St. Lawrence Parish in Ipswich, aged 80. I heard Master Moore, one of the bailiffs, say unto Master Withipoll these words in effect, Sir, we are the Queen's Majesty's justices, and do require you to keep her peace. To which Master Withipoll said, You are not justice in this place. Wherewith, giving a stamp on the ground with his foot, did swear by God's blood on that ground he would try it with them. And I saw Master Withipoll snatch at and lay his hand upon one of the maces, being borne before the bailiffs by Tross, their sergeant, and said, I will be so bold as to have this.
Martin Topcliffe of Ipswich, clothier of the age of 52 years, Edmund Withypoll, so accompanied, did encounter and come upon the bailiffs and officers walking the fair in the Queen's Highway, and then and there did stop and let the bailiffs, and said these words, or the like, in effect, Master bailiffs, leave off your progress and procession, and enter no further upon my liberties, for by the God's blood, this ground is mine, and here will I try it. And therewith stamped with his foot upon the ground, and further said, Ye have offered me too much wrong, and I will take it no longer at your hands, and therefore I charge you in the king's name to go no further. And so pressed further upon the bailiffs. And then and there they, with the town clerk of the town, greatly entreated him to forbear his rigor and malice, saying, Ye may it please ye try your little by order of law, and not this way. Whereunto Edmund Withypoll said, Tush, Howis, meaning the said town clerk, you need not teach me the law, I know the law well enough. John Hatch of Butley in the county of Suffolk, husbandman of the age 45 years. Being at the last fair by occasion, I saw Edmund Withypoll with 5 or 6 of his men awaiting of him come towards the bailiffs, being in the lane nigh the conduit, and put off his cap before he came to the bailiffs, and they likewise to him. Withypoll said, I pray you, master bailiffs, leave off your progress and procession, for you come here within my liberty, where you have nothing to do. And the bailiffs replied that they did not otherwise than their predecessors had done before, and said that they meant to go forth, and said they were the Queen's Majesty's justices, and commanded him to keep the peace. And he said he was a justice also, and commanded them to keep the peace. Whereupon the bailiffs commanded the sergeant to go on, to whom Edmund said, Although I have but a few in comparison of you, yet I will resist you to the utmost of my power. And thereupon he, the defendant, stepped to one of the sergeants and laid hold upon his mace, and said, If you will go, leave this behind you. But yet the sergeant kept the mace still. And then the bailiffs charged every man to keep the Queen's peace, and said, Lay hold of him, meaning Edward Withypoll, but being there a great number assembled, I could not see whether he was laid hold to or not, and more I know not.
Edmund Barker of Westerfield in the country of Suffolk, clerk, of the age of 37 years. Being at the fair, I saw Master Withipoll come forth from his back gate, having with him 8 or 6 of his servants following him towards the bailiffs. Being in the highway, nigh the conduit, and putting off his cap before he came near them, he said, I pray you, master bailiffs, leave your procession. And after, when he was come to them, he said, Bailiffs, I pray leave this going, for you have encroached upon me long. Then Master Bailiff Moore said that they went as in times past they had done, and we are the Queen's justices, and do as we have done in times past. And then Master Withypoll replied and said, I am the Queen's justice in this place as well as you. And then Bailiff Moore said, I charge you, Master Withypoll, to keep the Queen's peace and to permit us to go forward and not trouble us. And if we do you any wrong, the law is open, you may try it that way. And then one of the portmen, whom I remember not, commanded the sergeants to go forward. And then Master Withypoll said, that you shall not. And stepping forward somewhat vehemently, thrust at one of them and stretched his hand toward the mace and said, in the meantime, I will be doing with this. And then Tross did hold fast the mace, and immediately after followed after another cry, lay hold on him. And with the violence of the throng he was carried forth. But who laid hands on him, I know not.
Henry Cranton of Creating St. Mary in the county of Suffolk, husbandman of the age of 47 years. After Master Withypoll charged them in the Queen's name that they should not come within his liberties, the bailiffs charged him in the Queen's name to keep the peace and suffer them to pass as they had done. And one Master Baker, one of the portmen, said, go on. And then Master Withypoll bent his hand towards the mace and said, you shall not carry this then. But whether he laid a hand on the mace or not, I cannot tell. And then Master Barker, the elder, said, lay hold on him. But because the multitude was so great, I could not see who laid hand on him.
All right. I very much get the impression that these witnesses are having a great day. This is possibly one of the most exciting things that has happened in a long time, and they are enjoying it. Alan.
Given the locations, actually, of that last set of witnesses, whereas before, as David and I were both commenting, they were all basically from villages either in Ipswich itself or within 3 miles or thereabouts. These ones are slightly further away. Butley, Debenham, Creating are all maybe 10 miles away from the centre of Ipswich. So these are the country folk who come into the fair who are being deposed. Which
that's interesting.
Raises some interesting other issues as to why they felt it necessary to call people who were not within the town itself.
Aliki.
Well, we have from an earlier deposition the impression that this was near the edge of the horse fair. So I wonder if this all took place in a place where the country folk were more likely to be, where cattle were being traded. Also, I expect that they would have been even more drawn to, the excitement. Like there are villages in my part of Greece where everybody comes out to look when a car drives through the village. Can you imagine the excitement of this?
There's bits of Suffolk that ain't different to that these days, Aliki.
Yeah. Well, just up the road from there's a pub called the Woolpack, which is where all the people used to stop and have a drink, bringing the sheep into town. So yeah, you're probably right with the sort of horse fair.
Yeah, Lynn.
Well, I don't know. I might be kind of layering a modern sort of legal sensibility on top of this. But if I were bringing this case, I would want as many witnesses as I could have and make that group of witnesses kind of as varied as possible. We have people from within Ipswich, people within 3 or 4 miles of the city center, and people who live more like 10 miles. So, we have local witnesses who probably know this Withypoll fairly well. We have near neighbors, we have people from the countryside. So, and they're all telling a very similar stories. So this is building a really strong case that you have a bunch of witnesses who come from various distances from Ipswich who may or may not know this Withypoll before, and they're all saying really similar things, which again, I don't know if they knew this in the early modern period. if you have eyewitness testimony that agrees in every detail, that's a setup. That's, yeah, because that doesn't happen naturally. But when you have eyewitness testimony that agrees in the broader outline, but tends to vary, people's memories tend to vary, that's how that actually happens. So this is building a really strong case that at least that Withypoll engaged in this behavior. Whether he had the right to or not, that's a different question. But and he seems to be, the other thing I was noticing, he seems to be a person of some substance. He has 5 to 8 male servants with him, and male servants were fairly expensive to maintain, and they wear livery. So he doesn't have a title, but he seems to be a gentleman with some wealth at his disposal.
And the lands of the late priory. Yes, David.
Yeah, he had a large house built, which still exists, which is called Christchurch Mansion now, but was Withypoll House when he first built it. Yeah, and this is all in the same area again. And yeah, you can still go and visit that. If you look it up, Christchurch Mansion, Ipswich, you'll find all sorts of stuff on the web about that. He was a justice of the peace from 1561. And he was also sheriff at one point. That's of the county. So yes, he had quite a lot of money. He left London under dubious circumstances. There was a manslaughter case against him in Walthamstow, which is northeast London. And the Queen at the time, Catherine Parr, sort of beseeched whoever to let him off that one. And that's probably why he ended up in Ipswich. But he had a lot of money. He was involved in some sort of fisticuffs in Boulogne as well.
Right.
So an interesting character. When I say fisticuffs, I mean a battle. So yes, a man of some substance.
And with an appetite for trouble, it seems. So David, from a local history point of view, I'm sure you will have clocked that we have another clue about where the loot may have been. Saying, because we have someone saying, in the Queen's highway that leadeth from St. Margaret's Green towards Westerfield, going towards the loot. So the loot will have been in that direction from the Green.
Yeah, probably about where the aforementioned pub called the Woolpack was, I'm guessing, from the...
Yeah. And the other question I had for you is, do we know where the conduit was?
Well, I think that was sort of all in that area there. There's a church called St. Margaret's Church, which was very much connected with his family. That was the place they did all the baptisms and things like that. So, yeah, very interesting. I want to look some more up there, having listened to this.
Yeah, it has its moments. Rachael, are you waving? No. Yes. No, she's not waving. All right.
Drowning.
Okay, now we've just got a few extras here about how people were armed. Oh, sorry, Alan?
Yeah, just one question before we go into the final stretch. I think there's a problem with the casting because John Clark has been allocated to both Kyle and myself.
Kyle, be John Clark. It's a first timer. You should get extra John Clark.
Okay. Thank you.
Alan will cope.
I'm sure I can manage.
Okay, thank you, Alan. Right. So we're starting off with John Ketteridge.
John Ketteridge of Ipswich, Fletcher of the age of 30 years. Being in the fair about my business, I saw the defendant come out of his gate with 6 or 7 of his men following him, and meeting with the bailiffs, who had newly examined a vagabond for his passport, he said, "Master bailiffs, why do you trouble me? Leave off this your procession." And the bailiffs answered, "We are the Queen's lieutenants and justices here, and will proceed as we have usually done heretofore." And then the defendant said, "Master bailiffs, you shall not proceed further in this place, for it is mine, and I have good matter to show for it, and I am but a few against you, but I will stand against you to the uttermost of my power. Striking his foot down upon the ground and swearing a great oath, then said to the bailiffs, we have usually gone this way. And Master Wheatcroft said, this is the Queen's highway, Master Withypoll, and we mean to go forth in it. And then Master Bailiffs bade the sergeant go on, and upon that Master Withypoll stretched his left hand towards the mace and took it in his hand, but pulled it not away, and with his right hand struck Master Barker, the elder, being one of the 12 of the town, upon the breast. And then the bailiffs commanded to lay hands of him, and John Barker, one of the constables, laid hands of him. And in this trouble I saw one of Master Withypoll's men, whose name I think to be Warner, bent a stripe with a brush bill, as seemed to me against the bailiffs, but he was stayed by divers that stood about. And further, after John Barker, the constable, had laid hold on Master Withypoll, one of his men, being a Welshman, bent a blow towards the constable, which I did stay, and the Welshman was by and by apprehended by the commandment of the constable. His dagger being taken away, he felt for his knives, meaning, as I think, to have thrust them in the belly of some of them that apprehended him. Giles Steadman of Ipswich, merchant, of the age of 45 years. I heard Edmund Wythipoll say to John Barker, one of the constables of the town, when he had laid hold of him by the commandment of the bailiffs, these words following, or the like in effect, ye God's blood, villain, let go thy hold, or I will be thy priest. What, wouldst thou have it from me? Nay, by God's blood, I will see thy haste first.
Has nobody got Thomas Trenchfield?
Sorry, I was muted.
Ah.
Thomas Trenchfield of Ipswich, shoemaker of the age of 24 years. As the bailiffs and the officers were going into the fair, Edmund Withypoll met them in the way nigh the conduit head, the one of them saluting the other. Edmund Withypoll saying, Master bailiffs, whither are ye going a procession this way? And the bailiffs answered, we are going into the fair to see good order kept, as we have used herefore to do. Edmund Withypoll replied, ye have nothing here to do, for it is within my liberties, and that I will try with you here on this ground, stamping his foot violently upon the ground, and will withstand you, though I be fewer than you in number, to the utmost of my power. And stretching his hand to Richard Tross, one of the sergeants, and taking the mace in his hand, he said, I will have this to bargain withal. But the sergeant held it so fast that he could not take it from him, and the people coming there towards them in great numbers, the bailiff commanded them all to keep the queen's peace and lay hold of Edmund to carry him to jail. And immediately one of the servants of Edmund came running down in the highway towards his master with his sword under his arm, and fearing lest he would do some harm, I asked him whither he went. And the servant said, what hast thou to do to know? And I said, I will stay thee, that thou shalt do no harm here, for here be wiser men than thou. Here let them deal with this matter. And with that the servant laid his hand on his sword to have drawn it out, but was prevented by me and others. Thomas Kane of Claydon in the county of Suffolk, collar maker of the age of 44 years. I saw Edmund Withypoll in his meeting with the bailiffs in the fair, thrust at old Master Barker, one of the portmen of the town, with his fist at his breast. And I saw two men, the one having brush hook and the other a black bill in the fair, who were Edmund Withypoll's servants, as I judge, which came down from that horse fair to the fair where Edmund and the bailiffs of the town were then together. But I saw them strike nobody.
Robert Osborne of St. Lawrence Parish in Ipswich, aged 80. One of the servants of Master Withypoll offered to have taken a staff from a countryman in the fair, but he prevailed not.
Richard Stern of Colfu in the county of Suffolk, tailor of the age of 60 years. Being the last fair day and seeing the bailiffs and other officers and the defendant meet there with much people about them, I drew towards them and saw a dagger drawn, being one of Master Withypoll, his servants, and holden above the heads of the people, but who held it up, I know not.
Robert Wilbur of Ipswich, cloth worker of the age of 24 years. When Master Withipoll laid hold of one of the maces with his one hand, he gave Master Parker, now bailiff, of a thrust of a breast with the other hand. Whereupon John Barker, the younger then constable, laid hold of him, and immediately I did see a dagger drawn in the hands of one of the servants of Master Withipoll, whose name I knew not. The dagger was taken from him by men of the country. Thomas Cage of Ipswich, tailor, of the age of 34 years. I saw the bailiffs come into the fair in like manner and form as I had beforetime seen them usually come, and meeting with a vagabond, they examined him for his passport and of other circumstances, and forthwith I saw Edmund come forth out of his back gate, accompanied with 6 of his men, whereof one of them had a sword and dagger. And meeting with the bailiffs in the highway near the conduit head, he beckoned with his hand toward the bailiffs, saying, "Leave off your progress and procession, and trouble me no further, for you have long usurped within my liberties, and I will suffer you no longer, but will try it with you upon this place," stamping his foot upon the ground, "to the uttermost part of my power." To the which was answered by the bailiffs, "We are now in the Queen's highway, and of the Queen's justices." But Master Withypoll answered, "So am I." And the bailiffs replied, saying, "But not in this place." Whereupon the bailiffs bade the sergeants proceed on, and forthwith Master Withypoll laid hold of one of the maces with one hand, and struck Master Barker the bailiff on the breast with the other hand, and swearing a great oath said, "This will I have then to begin withal." Thereupon the bailiffs charged the officers to lay hold on him, whereupon John Barker the younger, being one of the constables, laid hold on him, and the throng of people being great, I saw a dagger holden up over the head of the people by one Edward Cage, being servant to the town clerk, who said he took it from one of the servants of Master Withypoll, which dagger I took of him and brought it home. And one Warner, then servant to Master Withypoll, had a brush bill new-helved, and therewith bent a blow towards the bailiffs, and I and others there present laid hold thereof and stayed it. And one other of the servants of the said Master Withypoll, called John Thompson, took a walking staff from a stranger standing thereby, and pressing into the throng towards his master, coming by me, I laid hold of the staff and stayed him, that he went no further.
John Hewling, Ipswich, cooper, of the age of 48 years. After the bailiffs and Master Withypoll met, and had some talk together, much to the effect of that hath been before deposed, I saw one of the servants of Master Withypoll, whose name I know not, hold up a naked dagger over the head of the people, and reaching up my hand to have laid hold the dagger, the servant drew down his hand and set me a good blow upon my right hand with the pommel thereof.
Robert Wilson of Ipswich, shearman of the age of 40 years and more. I did see one Warner, a retainer to Master Withypoll, and one Butler, a bricklayer, run through the fair in the time of the strife between Master Withypoll and the bailiffs, Warner carrying a brush bill in his arms, and the other a halberd.
Geoffrey Cash of Ipswich, baker, of the age of 56 years. I saw Warner bear a bill on his shoulder, and I never saw Edmund Withypoll or any of his servants do so at any time before in the fair.
Richard Tross, one of the sergeants of the town of Ipswich, of the age of 32 years. On the fair day I did bear before the bailiffs one of the maces, and they, meeting Master Withipoll in the conduit head in the Queen's highway, Master Withipoll said unto them these or the like words: "Leave your procession and go no further on my ground. If you do, by God's blood, I will resist you to the uttermost of my power, and that you should well know, if your power were in no better than mine." Whereupon the bailiffs, saying they were the Queen's justices, commanded him to keep the peace. And Master Withipoll answered, "I am a justice as well as you, and command you in the Queen's name that you keep the peace." to whom the bailiffs replied and said he was no justice in that place, and that if they did him wrong, he might reform it by the order of the law, which was open and indifferent for them both. And then the bailiffs commanded them, me and the rest to proceed. Wherewith Master Withypoll stretched forth his hands to have taken two of the maces and laid hold of my mace with violence to have taken it away. So I was forced to stay it with both my hands and wrest it out of Master Withypoll's hand. Whereupon the bailiffs commanded the officers to take hold of him and to carry him to the jail. And thereupon I, together with John Barker, one of the constables, laid hold of him and led him a little way and let him go by himself with the bailiffs to the house of Geoffrey Gilbert, then one of the bailiffs, where he did put in bond for his good behavior, and his further appearance at the next session is to be holden for the town. And then Master Withypoll departed home.
Thank you. A fun day at the fair was had by all. So, Alan.
Reminds me a little bit of match days in Ipswich when there's a local derby between them and Norwich City.
Well, there you go, rural amusements.
Yep.
I was interested in the passport for the vagabond. I hadn't heard of passports for vagabonds this early, but it's not something that I know a tremendous amount about. I mean, I know they had to have them later, but this is what, 68-ish, 1568-ish.
Yeah.
Hey, Alan.
So, thought occurs to me, we've mentioned that Withypoll was actually a sheriff of the county of Suffolk.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just wondering whether his JP, Justice of the Peace appointment, was also for the county. And therefore, part of what we've got is a dispute between those who had jurisdiction within the broader county and those who had jurisdiction within the borough.
Yes, he was a Justice of the Peace for Suffolk.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
But the bailiffs for the time being would be the justices for the town.
Yes.
I imagine that they had that right, but I've never read their charter. Lynn.
Do we know when Withypoll came to the county? You said that he had been in trouble in London and Catherine Parr had interceded on his behalf, and she died in 48.
Yeah, that was 45. He was pardoned.
So so this is quite a bit later.
Yes, definitely. Yes, he's established himself. He's bought this priory, which has given him a right to the fair.
Oh no, it hasn't.
Yeah, well, exactly. Yeah. I mean, the interesting thing, actually, as a result of this case, the town had to raise taxes to pay for all of this legislation, and take out loans, apparently.
It's interesting that he waited 20 years plus to decide to, get into this pissing contest with the bailiffs.
Yeah, maybe they'd upset him in some way or something.
There you go.
Yeah. So, David, you're saying that this case is known to local historians?
Well, I certainly found mention of it when I was having a look earlier on. I thought I'd better do a little bit of reading before I came. And yeah, they're sort of saying that mainly because it costs the town money.
Right.
I suspect that's the main reason it's really mentioned.
Right. There was a lawyer surcharge on the rates that year.
Yeah. Well, I'm assuming there'd have been other hearings before the Star Chamber. I mean, it probably got escalated in the same way as they do now. I don't know, but
yes, I mean, it may have gone straight to Star Chamber because I haven't read the
possibly.
other documents.
Yeah.
I really don't know whether they tried it in other courts first. But there's absolutely no reason why it shouldn't have gone straight to Star Chamber.
True. Yeah.
Yeah. Who else would have authority because both of these parties are claiming to be basically the authority locally, and there wasn't sort of a middle tier between, right?
Yes, except I would have thought if they were trying for possession of the fair, King's Bench would have been
there was
quite appropriate.
a judicial body.
Yeah, I think you should get out of your mind the idea of a hierarchy of courts.
Yeah,
There were an awful lot of competing courts.
Yeah, jurisdiction was very complicated and overlapping, and
Contentious is the word you're looking for. Yeah.
I had to look at the main character, and I noticed that I found that he had gotten into trouble before for enclosing, that he was enclosing in this, which I thought was something interesting about this. And he keeps mentioning my liberties, which I thought was strange. I thought liberties were like free places outside of jurisdictions, but I guess you can own liberties. I didn't realize that, which I thought that was I also found that he knew Gabriel Harvey and Gascoigne.
Oh, right. Well, okay, he gets points for knowing Gabriel Harvey, but not enough, I think. Alan.
I think maybe part of Withypoll's rationale is that he bought the priory, presumably as part of the spoils of the dissolution, and believed that he didn't also acquired any rights that the prior or priory would have had with the purchase of the land and buildings.
Right.
Aliki.
So we know from some of the earliest depositions of the older men that the prior and the bailiffs worked together in the business of policing the fair. And now he's going against that custom. I wonder if he tried to become bailiff and failed, and is trying to get some of the profits of the fair this way.
It seems highly unlikely, because had he been eligible to become bailiff, he must have been a freeman of Ipswich, and therefore he would have taken an oath that his primary allegiance was to the town. I think it's highly unlikely that he was free of Ipswich. I mean, the liberties of a place are the area in which those who are free of the place are free of the place, if you see what I mean. It's got nothing to do with freedom to do what you want. It's fundamentally freedom to trade. Liza, you're muted.
To me, this has echoes of disputes between what you can do on private property and the fact that a public highway is running through it. That the bailiff, he's saying, this is my fair, presumably he's saying my land. Is it his land? Or anyway, he says the fair is his, and then the bailiffs who are on the Queen's Highway, which is a public right-of-way, say, you can't stop us from walking down this road. And he stands in front of them and says, yes, I can, because I'm also in this road and I'm standing in front of you. The other thing is, it's really interesting that a lot of the witnesses with the better view are tailors and cloth workers. So this must have been the section of the fair where all of the textile people were. I'm sort of trying to figure out the geography of the fair in my head, and there's certainly there's a horse fair that takes place in a slightly different area from the rest of the fair, the horse fair where horses are sold, and then presumably there's trading. We haven't had anyone who sold food or drink, so that must have been further away. Anyway. I'm just speculating here, but it's fun to speculate.
Yes, Kyle, could you say a little more about the enclosures?
Oh yeah. Oh no, I just saw. That's what I saw, was that he was busy enclosing things.
That would make him popular.
would, I'm wondering about, like, he's doing a lot of enclosing, and what Liza said about this, like, private property and trying to control. I mean, why doesn't he want them in there? He's, is it because he wants to be able to control measures and things like that? I'm just wondering, the enclosing and that, it seems like he's very much a kind of capitalistic.
Yeah. Well,
And maybe he doesn't have a lot of friends for that reason too.
Yeah, but if we think about the fair, it is a profitable matter. There would be charges to come in. There would be fines. I mean, they didn't just break up weights, they would fine the people. There was money to be made out of holding a fair. And presumably he wanted that. Who was next?
Yeah, and presumably he also would have wanted, to protect people. Well, he would have wanted to protect people who might generate him profit in the fair from being arrested as vagabonds.
Yes, but are we all fared out? There is an enormous amount more of this case. I mean, there's all Withypoll's own depositions. I mean, he makes an enormous deposition, which I haven't got to yet, and plenty of other things. So if there are local historians out there, I would be delighted to send you some pictures of the documents, and you can wrestle with bad secretary hand instead of me, while I pass on to new cases, because the sole effort of the project is to put a county name on every case. We're not unwrapping everything. Lynn.
But so you're saying you haven't read all the documentation yet? We might actually have a case where we know the resolution?
I
Too much to hope?
don't know. I think the resolution may well be in the Ipswich records. I can't find that anybody was fined. There is no, in the Exchequer of Receipt, among the Star Chamber fines received, I can't find anything. The result of the case may well be out there, but it's unlikely to be in the documents that I have. Alan.
I think David's already mentioned that the borough had to actually approach Parliament to get new laws or variations to charters written to try and restore the status quo, which cost them an awful lot of money. So that is quite possibly the overall upshot of this.
What, can I ask, is there still a Holyrood Fair?
No.
I was curious about that too. Is there knowledge about why there isn't anymore?
That would be worth researching on its own, actually, wouldn't it, as to when it died out. But they have lots of other things on what were the Priory grounds, but is now actually called Christchurch Park, and it's a very big park right in the middle of town. And they have all sorts of events on there, so maybe things just morphed into something new.
I mean, it's now a venue for pop concerts and
it can
orchestral
be,
concerts and so on. And historical recreation fairs, I remember, in the not too distant past. You know, all of these, of course, in pre-plague days. I suspect it's probably far less used over the last couple of years.
Lynn.
I'm guessing a lot of fairs were banned during the interregnum because, you know, you want to talk about a buzzkill.
Yes.
Cromwell.
Yeah, but this, I mean, you'll notice there's no mention of entertainers here. I mean, we have an annual Hull Fair in Hull, and it's big. I mean, really enormous. But apart from what one might call fairings, which are all the toys that you don't want your children to have, you have rides and games of chance, you know, hook a duck and all the other fun things. Now, we've got a list of where everybody stood for the fair in 1600. And it's all horses, cattle, sheep, silk men, pewter workers, joiners, and the food trades and London wares and all sorts of other things. But there's no mention of entertainers of any sort, though they would undoubtedly have been there. Liza.
Well, I'm guessing maybe the entertainers were, as it were, freelancers who just turned up and busked.
Yeah.
It's also possible that the people running the food and drink vendors may have had individual deals with perhaps ballad singers or individual entertainers to draw people to their pitch rather than anyone else's. Food and entertainment being linked of old. I'm sorry, Rachel, I talked over you.
I was just gonna say, it kind of reminds me of like a county fair, just where there's food, I don't know, darts, things like that. You know, you just go there and eat and meet up with people, and then there's a certain area where there's pigs and kids can go and ride horses and something, you know, the little donkeys and things.
Yeah.
I mean, there's still a county show for Suffolk in non-plague times, which is actually about 3 miles east of the venue we've been talking about.
Aliki.
I think it's more like a county fair in the original sense. It's a trade fair. You come to buy and sell.
But didn't those tend to sort of morph into more diverse kinds of gatherings? I mean, Bartholomew Fair started out as a textile fair where people came and wholesalers came with cloth and retailers bought stuff to make clothing out of. But by the late 16th, early 17th century, Bartholomew Fair was this huge thing where people came from all over, and there was food and drink, entertainment, there was puppet shows, evidently. So yeah, things that start out as a trade fair for specialists often, I think, seem to sort of grow into these much more diversified kind of gatherings. People like to be where people are. That's just something human beings do.
Yeah. Well, yes, I think we probably talked this out. I'm very much obliged to all of you as always. And thank you to our audience for watching, as well as to our readers, our wonderful readers from the Beyond Shakespeare Company, and our visiting local historian, David Davies. It has reinforced my view that these things need a local historian. We hope to be back soon with some more cases, and in the meantime, I remind you that it is your duty daily to pray to Almighty God for Her Majesty's long life and prosperous reign, long to reign over us.